Hello and welcome to Whole Food Plant-Based No Oil Cooking with Brian and Joe. This video is sponsored by the Indianapolis Public Library. They are a great resource for whole food plant-based cooking and nutrition. We will be doing 2 recipes today. They should be available. Links to them should be available in the comments below. If not, I'm sure if you place a comment, someone will probably help you and direct you to the right place. The 2 recipes we're doing today will be a lentil casserole. This is lentils, kidney beans, tomatoes, onions, some spices, and other things. Again, we do a lot of base recipes here. We provide a lot of suggestions and variations so that you can take these recipes in any direction you'd like. The other recipe we're having a snack. This is a sugar-free banana cookie. Very simple, very fast, very easy to do, and you can take this probably in a lot of directions. We will also be talking with a Dr. Palmer Mackay, who will help us with plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine. So let's get started with some introductions, and then we'll start into the recipes, and the discussion with Dr. Palmer will be intermixed along with the videos. So let's get started.
We're joined today by Palmer Mackay, and I'll start with a little disclaimer, as we always do. Although Palmer is a physician, he is not your physician. And so anything that we say should be used for education and information. But before you make any substantial changes to your lifestyle, be sure to consult your personal physician or medical professional. Palmer, as I mentioned, you are a physician, and how long have you been a physician?
I've been a physician for 29 years now, so approaching 30, and I've done my training in internal medicine and integrative medicine, so hypnosis, acupuncture, exercise, mind, body, and then over the last 6 years, I've transitioned to a 100% plant-based nutrition scheme.
So you've been practicing for nearly 30 years, and the last 6 of those have been in lifestyle medicine and in plant-based?
Correct.
And how has that transition to lifestyle medicine and to a whole food plant-based diet impacted you and your patients?
It's really kind of crystallized the ideas that we've had in my practice for a long time, in that you want to provide the power and the agency to the individual. And lifestyle medicine and plant-based diet really does that, because once you learn some of the basics and begin to implement those, the prevention, reversal, and treatment of disease processes becomes under the power of the agency of the individual, not relying on the medical industrial complex. And it's also interesting because individuals are so hungry for this, at least the ones that take a bite and discover that it's not forbidden fruit. In fact, it's the exact thing that they need. And they come back even hungrier. You know, if getting rid of X, Y, and Z that is harmful helped my numbers this much, how much more do you think I could be benefited, you know, with an exercise, with relaxation, with, you know, really lowering the fat, so that it builds a sense of momentum along with the agency. But that momentum kind of brings them back, which is super helpful, because even though they have agency, there's still preventive tests and examinations and vaccinations and things, which we still want everybody to get, even as they grow healthier and healthier.
Well, obviously, this is a huge topic because, as you noted, there's the food aspect of it, but there are also many other aspects of lifestyle medicine. There's exercise, there's relaxation, there are things that we haven't even talked about, like sleep and involvement in community. And those are all topics that I hope we will explore at great length in future videos. But today, we're going to talk about food.
Excellent. I love food. It's the way to go. And it arguably, I think it is the foundation of the six pillars of lifestyle.
Okay, so we've heard from Dr. Palmer Mackay. Now let's get started with our first recipe. This will be the lentil casserole. Now I'm going to show you my variation on this. Now I'm going to start here with some diced onion. The variation that I'm using is that the tomato sauce is a fresh made tomato sauce that I did here. So rather than the crushed tomatoes and the herbs and celery and all that will be in the recipe, those are already in the sauce. So I'm using an equal amount of my homemade tomato sauce. We're starting off with the onions, the lentils, the kidney beans, the homemade tomato sauce, garlic, plant-based cheese sauce. So we start with dry sauteing these onions. There is no oil in this pan. They do take a little longer. You do have to watch them. But right now, I'm using an induction top, so this gives me actually temperature control. So I'm using this cast iron pot with the lining, and it is at 220 degrees. So just above the boiling point, and you want to keep them moving. Now, as you notice here, it's been about 10-15 minutes. You'll notice that there's a little bit of browning on the bottom, but that's okay. We will be taking that out with a deglazing when we put the sauce in. So now that we've got some color on the onions, we're going to add the garlic. Now I'm just using a garlic press, and again, I use a lot more garlic. I'm one of those believers in the two food group. One improved by the addition of garlic and one improved by the addition of chocolate. So scrape that off. We don't want to lose any of the good stuff. Now we'll put these in the pan and let them cook for a little bit. We want them to sort of get aromatic. We do not want them to burn. So just keep an eye on it. A little toasting is nice. These will probably be in for somewhere between 30 seconds to about a minute. So just as long as they don't burn. That's the important part. Our next addition is going to be the sauce. And like I said, as you can see, there's a little bit of coloring probably on the pan, but we will deglaze that with the sauce. Now this homemade sauce, I will have a video on how to do tomato sauce at home later on. So, but for now. And as you can see, the sauce has nicely deglazed the pan. So there's nothing sticky, nothing burned on the bottom. The lentils I made that morning. In fact, they are still pretty warm. Kidney beans, again, cooked this morning. At the end of this video, I will show you quick videos of basically how difficult it is to make beans from dry, and you don't have to soak overnight. The lentils are cooked in a pan in water, and the kidney beans were cooked in an electric pressure cooker. Okay. So I've got everything mixed together, nicely incorporated. So, one thing I did not point out, and I just remembered here, is I like to add a little bit of vegan Worcestershire sauce. It helps give a little bit of a meaty flavor to it, just so that umami. And that was the house brand at Kroger. Just check the brands of Worcestershire and look for one that is vegan. Now I want this to heat through. I want this to cook. I want everything to be nice and hot. So this was on for probably about 5 to 10 minutes. You can see some steam coming off here, and we're bubbling. I want most of the cooking to be done here. The oven, we're going to use the broiler, and that essentially is to melt and brown the cheese. Now I'm using a cauliflower-based queso cheese here. It's a nice cheese sauce. You can probably skip putting it in the oven at this point, unless you want to add a little bit of color and you want nice presentation. So just put a nice thin layer on. And we'll put this in the oven. While this is baking in the oven, we'll go back and talking to Dr. Palmer McKay.
So our main topic today is our main course, which is a lentil casserole or lentil stew. And one of the things that I've noticed as I've gone to a plant-based diet is that I'm eating a lot more legumes. It wasn't a part of at least my diet growing up. So let's talk legumes. Let's start with the basic for people who have not been exposed to that term before. When we say legumes, what are we talking about?
So it's interesting. Depends on how you split it. Legumes are really the total plant of the beans, lentils, some seeds. So that's the pod as well as the leaves. And then the kind of corollary terms, the pulses. And the pulses are what we really think about when we think about legumes. It's the lentil, it's the bean, it's the soy, it's the chickpea. It's kind of the fruit or the seed of the legume is the pulses. So for instance, you could be eating black bean leaves and that would still be legume. Whereas if you're just eating the black bean, that would technically be a pulse, the pulses.
Okay, so this is an interesting learning opportunity. What are the why should we care, and what parts should we be eating or be seeking out, and what parts are more optional?
So you should care. We all should care so much about legumes. It really cannot be overemphasized. From a bang for the buck standpoint, in terms of protein and fiber and meals, legumes are 15 to 20 cents a serving if you buy them dry and rehydrate them. So from an economical standpoint, they're unbelievable in terms of the B vitamins, the fiber, and the protein that you receive from them. There's one benefit. Another benefit is that from a greenhouse gas reduction, legumes are the lowest of the frequently eaten vegetables and fruits in terms of greenhouse gas production. Upwards of 50 to 100 times less than an animal equivalent of protein. So per serving, legumes save the planet every time you eat them. Then, what are they giving you in terms of health? Well, they give a really great combination of soluble and insoluble fiber. So why does that matter? Fiber is something which we cannot digest. So it feeds the bacteria, and it preferentially feeds the good bacteria. So the more fiber you eat, the healthier the bacteria in your intestines become. And the really cool thing about legumes is they actually have more soluble fiber than oats. So it's close to a 50 to 50% soluble to insoluble. And the soluble tends to coat simple carbohydrates, and it interferes with the processing and absorption of simple carbohydrates and cholesterol. So there's a couple of advantages now. Lower rise in sugar after you eat, lower absorption of cholesterol for the cholesterol that you do eat. It's inexpensive and it's not producing gases. And since you can't digest it, this is really one of the magical things that legumes do. Those fibers get transported down to the end of the small intestine. And so if I eat legumes for lunch, as I mentioned, it interferes with the absorption of simple carbohydrates or sugars. So my sugars don't go up. And if my sugars don't go up as high, I don't need as much insulin. So for diabetics, what's called the glycemic excursions after meals are less. And for all of us, it's less. Then when that little bit of non-digestible fiber makes it to the end of the small intestine, it signals back to the stomach to retard emptying on the second meal. So this is called the second meal effect. That when you eat legumes for lunch, you're actually protecting yourself against high sugars and high levels of insulin after you eat dinner. So the second meal effect is that legumes actually protect you twice from high sugars and from high insulin, which over time then helps protect you from insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes.
Wow. So as you started off by saying an enormous amount of bang for the buck, you're getting high levels of good quality nutrition for pennies a serving. And by the way, in our demo, in our cooking demo, we'll show people both how to prepare kidney beans from dried in a electric pressure cooker, popularly the Instant Pot, as well as use canned beans if that's something that is, something that's more convenient for them. I will make the note, and I love your input on this as well. We recommend that when people use canned beans, even if they do seek out the low sodium packed beans, that they rinse them thoroughly before they use them, just to try and get as much of that processing. They add salt to them just as a way of preserving, I guess. So that's a recommendation that we generally make. I know it's always nice to work from the fresh product, but that's not always practical for people. But getting back to this, so you've got the benefits in terms of nutrition, you've got the benefits in terms of ecological impact, you've got the benefits in terms of adding stability to blood sugar, whether you are diabetic or not. That's still something that's good for everyone. I would imagine, based on what you said, that that's going to help people with those afternoon crashes in energy level when they eat, garbage, let's be honest, as well as this knock-on effect of it's going to protect you for a second meal. So this leads me to the question of, is it possible to get too much of a good thing? How many servings of beans and pulses should we be eating in a day, for example?
Anywhere from 100 to 150 grams.
Okay. And that can be all at once or spread out over meals, however you prefer.
Right. I was having a conversation with one of my very best friends, and he said, you can't eat that many beans. How do you get that many legumes? And he said that as we were having breakfast and I was making him a smoothie. And I said, well, how's that smoothie? He said, good. I said, well, I used cannellini beans as the cream agent in that smoothie. So you just had your first serving. And I said, for appetizer at dinner last night, we had hummus. He goes, oh yeah. And then he volunteers, and I always put beans on all my salads. Mm-hmm. And so there he's had his 3 servings of legumes in a day. And so it's not difficult. It is a change for most Americans.
Yes.
But if you eat a salad a day, there's one easy way. If you eat soup, if you do smoothies, if you eat hummus, there are just so many ways to get the beans in. And I really like, you're making that lentil dish. I make a lot of Indian or Ethiopian lentils. And after I get done eating them, I cook them a little bit more to dehydrate them and then make them into patties. So that you have the moist, wet kind of casserole dish, and then you add a little bit of a filler, and then you have patties that are very portable, can be frozen, and easy to use at a later time, so that you don't have to kind of get stuck with leftovers and eat the same thing. You can dress it up almost like a burger.
It's always great talking to you because you preview so much of what we've got coming down the pike for us. We're certainly, Brian has a really wonderful formula for mix and match, how to take leftover pulses, grains, all sorts of things, and put together. You don't even have to make the same patties all the time. So we've got that coming. There were a couple of other things that you talked about. So, the big one is what we try to do with this series of videos is get people to start thinking differently about the way that they put meals together. And I think that's exactly what you're getting to, that we fall into certain habits about ways to use certain ingredients. But when we open up our mind to the idea that we can use beans in a different way, like as a thickener for a smoothie or as hummus, which hummus has gotten really popular, but I don't think a lot of people are really all that familiar with what it actually is. And we'll show in a future show, we'll show some ways to make really healthy and really tasty variations on hummus. But this is a big topic, and I think we've just started to open the lid on the can of beans, but we will dive deeper.
One of the other things that the whole world has noticed is many of the people who might listen or see this are familiar with the blue zones.
Mm-hmm.
Those areas in the world where they have the most people who live to be 100. So Okinawa, Costa Rica, a couple of places, one in Italy, one in Greece, and then we have one in the United States with a 7-day Adventist day.
Mm-hmm.
But the nutritional theme in all of those is a high consumption of legumes.
And I think it's important to note that these aren't people who are just living to be 100. These are people who are living healthy at 100.
Right, they are living at 100 as opposed to being alive at 100. It's exactly right.
Yeah, it's an important distinction. Okay, well, I think we're gonna leave it at there for legumes. Obviously, I lied. I do have one further question. So you made the distinction early on about the difference between legumes and pulses. And so is the main nutritional benefit from the beans themselves, or is there benefit to more of the parts of the plant as well?
Well, I'll give you an example. Technically peas could be considered part of the legume, and we frequently eat the pods of peas. And for edamame,
mm-hmm.
the pods. So there is nutritional benefit in a number of the pods. And I have not eaten the leaves of any legumes that I'm aware of. So I can't say for certain about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure which of them are edible and which aren't, and some of them I know are just too tough. They just aren't a pleasant experience.
Right. We don't have the stomachs for that,
or the teeth. But more fodder for future shows. All right.
Dr. Palmer provided, I think, quite a bit of information as to the use of legumes. So it'll be great to basically incorporate some more of that into future recipes in our diet. So I'm going to pull the, it's been about 20 minutes in the oven. I'm going to pull this out. This has been under the broiler only. So the color in the cheese is a little bit light. I'm pulling it a little early because I don't want it to get too toasted. I don't want it to burn again. So we have a nice casserole here. We'll serve it up. Now, in this household, both of us are pretty heavy eaters. So these are probably about 2 servings apiece. And again, remember that this is loaded with lentils, kidney beans, tomatoes, onions. We also do like our cheese sauce. So I'm adding just a little extra. And you could put as little or as much or as little as you would like. Now this recipe is very versatile. You can take this in many directions. One of the things we've done is we have served this on hot dogs as a chili dog. We have served this on pasta, on rice. You can change the spice mix and go in many directions. So our next recipe is going to be the sugar-free banana cookies. We'll start off with the ingredient list and mixing it together. Now, I used the wrong size scoop on here, and I only got 9 cookies instead of a dozen. So, and I wanted to flatten them out, and you'll see that in the video. But they still turned out really good. And we'll have Dr. Power Mackay talking about sugar, both natural and artificial. Well, not artificial, but natural and processed. So we'll get into that discussion. But let's put the cookies together first. So we'll start off with baking soda, flour. We're adding vanilla to this batch. We have our almond milk. We have 2 mashed bananas. So I'm going to mix these together. And before I add the vanilla, let's add the baking powder so that way we don't dirty the spoon. It's a lot easier to have powder first and then liquid than the other way around. So half a teaspoon of baking soda in a cup of all-purpose flour. If you've got pastry flour, these will probably turn out better. And then we're going to do a total of a teaspoon of vanilla in this. You could add things like maybe some vegan chocolate chips. You can add some other spices. Again, this is a nice base recipe. You could take it in several directions. I wanted to make sure that the baking soda was distributed throughout. Don't want it all in one lump. You just need to get all of it. It's all good stuff. Now I try to be kind of gentle mixing this together. I don't want them to come out tough. If you overwork your batters, both in cakes, cookies, breads, things like that, they can tend to be a little tough, especially the quick breads. So you want to mix them just enough to get them incorporated. And You'll see I'll occasionally do a strike down the center because I'm trying to make sure there's not a pocket of flour in the middle of the bowl. Sorry, my head's in the way. But yeah, I'm just checking the bottom of the bowl to make sure there's no flour. And that everything is nicely incorporated. You do not want to overwork this. And again, I have the wrong size scoop here. So you just scoop out a little bit. Now this is a silicone pad. This one actually happens to be pre-printed. You can get them like that, or you can get them blank. Up to you. I think these were on sale one day. Just want to finish off this last one. So, even though it was the wrong scoop, they're all pretty much the same size. Now, because they are thicker, I want to make sure that I flatten them out a little bit. Make sure they fully cook through. I also want to make sure that I don't have any little bits of banana sticking out. That might burn. So we'll stick these in the oven. About halfway through, I will flip them, and you'll see that. But while these are baking, let's talk with Dr. Palmer Mackay a little bit more about sugar.
And we're doing a really simple dessert this time. It's a very simple banana cookie. And the thing I want to talk to you about it is we have made a cookie that has all of its sweetness coming from the banana. So there's no added sugar. And I know this idea of added sugar has become a big topic because we found out that, especially in processed foods, food manufacturers are putting sugar into so many things. Could you talk a little bit about what all this added sugar is doing to us, or more importantly, why we might want to avoid it?
Sure. And just to ensure that people know is that there are a lot of commercial forces at play here, trying to get us to continue the sugar because that sugar tickles our brain. And it, in effect, creates a dependency, the mouth and the dopamine connection, so that in order for people to enjoy things after they've been eating sugar all the time, they kind of have to eat sugar all the time. Otherwise, they don't taste it. And it's a similar condition with salt. And that's why when you wean people off of that, they can begin to appreciate the real flavors of food again. So that salt in there has been in there, and they've been trying for years and years to make recommendations that we get down to no more than 10% of our calories from added sugar. And that has been a huge political fight. Britain, I think, is going to 5% now. But why do they want that? What is so important about that recommendation? That the more sugar you eat, the less healthy you are. It isn't that you're just having a little bit of sweet. You're consuming something, a simple carbohydrate, monosaccharide, generally, that raises inflammation. It makes it more likely for you to become obese. It makes it more likely for you to develop type 2 diabetes with insulin resistance. It raises your triglycerides, and that's one of the key fats in our body that trigger atherosclerosis. narrowing of the arteries that leads to heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, eye disease. And then the one thing that sugar does, which I think is irrefutable, even among the people who are sugaraholics, is the tooth decay, the oral hygiene problem associated with it. And so there are a number of these risk factors, but doesn't really harm you. And there was a study that came out a while ago looking at all causes of death. So it's called all-cause mortality. And they looked at sugar-sweetened beverages, primarily pop, Kool-Aid, and 100% fruit juices, 12-ounce servings of each. For each 12-ounce serving consumed every day, your mortality went up. That is, you were more likely to die. 11% or more. And so if you had 3 pops a day, that increased your risk of dying over the next, I can't remember how many years, I think it was a 6-year study, by up to 30%. And it went up even with fruit juices. So remember, I mentioned that it was a 12-ounce serving. A serving of fruit juice is just 6 ounce. So that was already 2 servings. And people think orange juice is super healthy. And so they'll drink a quart of it thinking that, they're getting all this vitamin C, which is going to do them a good service, which certainly there's good pulp. And if you get the pulp kind, there are added phytonutrients in it. But it's just a big burden of sugar. And so that leads to the question, is sugar sugar? And if you eat an apple and look at what happens to your blood sugar level and the insulin and compare that to drinking the juice of an apple over the same time frame, the sugar excursions, the peak of your sugar goes up with the apple juice much higher than it goes up with the apple. Same sugar, and it's the actual juice from the same kind of apple. And the same thing is true if you drink watermelon juice or cantaloupe juice or prune juice, because you're separating the sugars from the fiber. You're separating them from things that delay absorption or delay the exit out of the stomach, which allows for a more gradual lower level of sugar and a more gradual lower level of insulin. And remember that fiber, particularly that soluble fiber, interferes with the absorption of carbohydrates. And so when you take away the fruit and just have the sugar, you just get the harm. And in fact, if you drink a whole bunch of sugar water or a whole bunch of juice, your body actually, the sugars go up, and then you have such a huge burst of insulin that it drives your sugar level below baseline for a period of time. Whereas if you just eat an apple and even drink that same amount of juice, the apple helps correct that so that the body's tendency does not overcorrect. And the other thing is that fructose is used considerably in the commercial arena and used in quite high levels. It in particular is metabolized in the liver and can cause more harm in the liver in terms of fatty liver disease, and it appears to also be associated more with elevations in blood pressure. And so now you have elevations in blood pressure, potentially high sugars and obesity, and then fructose also changes the way we metabolize some other chemicals that can increase the risk for gout. So there are a lot of issues with concentrated sugars. And it's better to drink a 6-ounce fruit juice than 6 ounces of Kool-Aid or pop, but always better to eat a piece of fruit versus a pop, Kool-Aid, or the juices.
So two things that I wanted to follow up with you on there. When you were talking about the fructose, you were talking about that as an extracted product, as a purified fructose, not as the naturally occurring sugars in fruits.
Right.
And okay. And the other is, I love the example of the apple because, we consume apples in so many ways, from apple juice to applesauce to whole apples. And I always think that there's an interesting story to be told there about how the impact on processing, because obviously apple juice is the most processed. Applesauce is kind of somewhere in the middle, and the whole apple is not processed at all. Can you just tell us, the short version of the story of how those three different products get metabolized when we eat them?
Right. So the short version is the more it's processed, the less it's helpful to you, and the more likely it's harmful.
And
So,
that's because of that separation of the sugars and the fiber.
exactly. And so some people are bothered by the sediment and like apple cider. That sediment is protecting you. You actually want that. So if you have a very thick apple cider, it is better than plain apple juice. And then if you put baked apple and some cinnamon in a blender and make applesauce, you can absorb those sugars easier than you could if you ate the apple. But it's still superior in nutrition to the juice and superior towards the benefit that it gives you. And then the apple, similarly, being a whole food, and that's really what we always say, you want to eat a whole food, plant-based, that you get all the satisfaction of chewing. You get the sweet or the tart, you get the fiber, you get the pectin, you get the phytonutrients. And like green apples are particularly anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer. So you get a good Granny Smith, and you're fighting cancer. You're keeping your sugars down. You're lowering your cholesterol. You're getting great flavor, and you're not having to worry. People say, oh, there's so much sugar in fruit. Well, fruit is protected against diabetes too because of the soluble fiber and because of the other phytonutrients.
Great. So let's get back to our cookies, right? We've taken out the sugar, and we're encouraging people to use very ripe, so very sweet bananas, mashed as the sweetening agent in these cookies. Good trade-off.
Excellent. One of the things that I advocate to people who are big fans of desserts is to cook their fruit, because it gets some of that caramel flavor, it gets some of that sugar out, and you're still eating the whole fruit. So, seared pears, baked pears, grilled apples, grilled pineapple. You get some of that processing with the heat, which releases and caramelizes. And you get that good grilling reaction, which creates all those wonderful flavors through the Menard's reaction. And then they still get to eat the whole fruit. So I think it's a great way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're preserving that fiber. You've got all of that wonderful fiber that you get out of the bananas. You've got that really nice sweetness. You obviously have the really wonderful flavor of the banana. And you just gave me a great idea. Maybe in a future one, we'll try this with roasted bananas and see what we get out of that. That could be a really interesting way to go.
Yeah, I really like to spice them. So I use a little cayenne, nutmeg, and cinnamon, and make a kind of a savory roasted banana.
Yep, there are so many directions to go, and that's what we hope that we're doing with this series, is giving people base recipes, but really providing them as jumping off points, so that if you want to try variations on these, if you want to roast your bananas, if you want to spice the bananas, I like what I would call the sweet spices. So the nutmeg, cinnamon, mace, ground cardamom. There are all sorts of really wonderful flavors. I love the idea of adding a little bit of chilies, and those you can go from really mild to really spicy depending on your heat tolerance and what you like. And we can do another segment at some point about the health benefits of capsaicin. But really getting people to think about their food and the so many options that you have in the plant-based world that are both healthy and delicious and intriguing. I mean, the idea that eating a plant-based diet is somehow limiting or boring is something that I think we have to help people get past.
Right. I mean, your work as a psychologist, and one of the things I try to do is to get people to look at it as play. That when you embark on something new, be playful with it. It doesn't have to be scary or overly serious. And that's where, if you include children, it kind of takes that out of it. Because, you can decorate fruit, you can make little animals, and it's so much easier to do and safer to do with fruits than it is with animal-based foods.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I was going to say, since we started with legumes and ended with capsaicin, is that lentils are the most anti-inflammatory of the legumes. And then you rattled off a series of spices, including capsaicin, which are also anti-inflammatory. And so I would include, I imagine you really like ginger as well. So another really good anti-inflammatory. And so not only are you eating inexpensively, playfully, and tastefully, but you're decreasing the inflammation in your body.
Well, since you mentioned it, I'm going to put a plug in for one of our earlier videos, which is my Power Oatmeal, where we start with a bunch of fresh ginger and fresh turmeric and blend that together in the water that we cook the oats in. And I'll tell you, I start off almost every morning with a serving of that, topped with a bunch of fresh fruit, and it is just an unbelievably wonderful way to start the morning. And what's great about that is people say, oh, oatmeal, it takes so much time. I make it 10 servings at a time and keep it in the fridge. And then it's just a matter of sticking it in the microwave.
And so I put oatmeal in my smoothies, and then I use, my son made me my combination spice. So I have a whole jar of black cumin, turmeric, cayenne, ginger, clove, that's all made up. And so I just scoop it in with the oatmeal and either do a smoothie or the oatmeal and blueberries, just like you. It's a wonderful, wonderful way. It jumpstarts your metabolism. It wakes you up. Good fiber source, good phytonutrients. It's a great way to go.
Well, and the other thing, you get back to that idea of being playful. One of the other things that I do is I was playing around with the spice blend for this oatmeal, which I don't do as a smoothie. I do it as a bowl. And obviously, whatever works for you is great. But in addition to the ginger and the turmeric, and there's cinnamon and ground cardamom in there, but there's also a big, healthy pinch of black pepper for two reasons. One is it's really an interesting flavor in there with all of those, as I say, traditionally sweet spices, but also the black pepper and the, what is it, curcumin in the turmeric.
All right, the curcumin.
Mm-hmm. My understanding is that there is a synergistic interaction between those two that makes that more bioavailable and just a better nutritional choice for human bodies, right?
Right, they go super well together. It's like mustard and broccoli. You always want to have a little bit of mustard powder on your broccoli and a little black pepper with your turmeric.
So we will do. We'll get some more people. We'll invite some more people to the party, and we will do a whole thing on synergistic combinations as well. There's so much here. There's so much to play with. As Brian, who does most of the recipe development and the cooking demos here, likes to say all the time, he wants more people to play with their food.
Exactly.
Well, Palmer, thank you so much. This is really wonderful information. I hope that this encourages people to be a little bit more adventurous in their eating, to start rethinking their relationship with food, and to talk to their doctor, their nutritionist, any health professional that they're working with, either to maintain their health or to deal with a chronic condition, and look at how lifestyle medicine and nutrition can be a really important part of managing and in some cases reversing some of those conditions.
You're exactly right, and it really is fun. And there are a lot of resources around. American College of Lifestyle Medicine is the Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine. Ask your provider, and there are probably going to be some resources maybe associated with this video series as well.
Yes, I know that the library has a really wonderful list of resources that we will see if we can link in the description for the video. There are some great books. There are some really wonderful video documentaries that I always find inspiring and that I know you and I have both seen and been on panels to discuss. So there are great resources out there. I'm encouraged by the fact that more and more physicians seem to be looking at this as a really important part of their practice. And I think it says a lot about the body of evidence that is growing that just says, this is not a fad diet. This is really a way that we have to think about health.
It is a necessary change in direction, a necessary change in the very way that we conceptualize our approach of healthcare. As I mentioned earlier, we simply can't afford to use medications to treat our way out of something which is largely 70 to 80% of lifestyle-based pathology.
Well, thank you. And I hope everybody enjoys the recipes and makes them and plays with them and tells us how their experiments have gone.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that was very informative. And it's now been about 18 to 20 minutes. Check these throughout. You want to have a little color. You don't want them burnt or anything. But you do want to have some nice color. You want to make sure that they are cooked. And when they start turning brown around the edges, that should be your first indication. So we'll put them on the cooling rack and let them cool for a little bit. There we go. One of the things I like to do is I like to put a oven mitt on a hot pan. It sort of tells anyone else in the house, this is hot, don't touch. So here we go. Got some nice cookies. They've got some nice color on them. They're not over browned or dark or burnt. They've got some nice color. Take a look inside. Nice and moist, but cooked through, so it's not like any raw spots. So once they're fully cooled, you just need to put them in an airtight container. You can refrigerate these, you can leave them on the counter, but I wouldn't do it for more than a couple of days, and they don't last that long. And we'll just take off with the extra one. Making kidney beans in an electric pressure cooker. You want to sort your beans, make sure there's no rocks. That still happens from time to time. We want to go to the 6-cup mark inside the pan with water. Don't use any salt. Salt has a tendency to make beans tough. You could put garlic in if you like, if you want to flavor them that way. Maybe some bay leaves or something like that. My lid stuck. Here we go. So you're going to select pressure, and it defaults to 30, but, and I did do 30. They did not cook all the way through. I found that kidney beans take about 40 minutes. So we'll do our lentils. I've already rinsed these lentils. This is a pound of lentils. They're pre-rinsed. here. Again, no salt. And lentils, like beans, will usually cook at about 3 to 1 in water, and they will get to about 3 times their original weight once they're finished cooking. So if you're doing a recipe and you want to know how many beans or lentils or whatever to do, just remember, multiply by 3 if you're doing things by weight. So this has got about 3 pounds of water in it. That's 6 cups for anyone doing the math. On the pan, like with rice, you want to bring it to the boil. So it's come up to the boil. Give it a quick stir, put the lid on, and then I'm going to drop it down to simmer. That's about 190 degrees. So, and then it goes for about 20 to 25 minutes. Afterwards, you'll do about a 5-minute rest. And there we go. That's how hard it is to do lentils. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the videos. Please leave some comments. I hope you try them and enjoy them. If you have any suggestions, if you have comments, if you try different variations of these, let us know. Maybe we'll incorporate those with our own. So I hope everyone had a good time. I hope you enjoyed the talk with Dr. Mackay. I think there was a lot of good information there, and I hope to see you on our next video. So everyone, take care, stay safe, and be healthy.